have those photos? I'm not sure. I just want to make sure. Destiny's mother didn't want the court to see those photos, so I wanted to make sure that you had.
I have seen them.
You have seen them. Okay. All right. Great.
Anything else before we begin?
No, you.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez, you entered into a plea agreement April 1st, 2022 in this matter. There's a judgment of the court that you're guilty of count 1, attempted to commit first-degree murder, a class 2 felony, and instead of count 1, count 2 is attempted to commit murder, a class 1 felony. I'm sorry, attempted to commit first-degree murder, a class 2 felony. Count 5, aggravated assault, a class 3 felony, and count 6, aggravated assault, a class 3 felony. All of these offenses occurred May 20th of 2020. Counts 1, 2, and 5 are dangerous offenses and non-repetitive offenses. Count 6 is a non-dangerous, non-repetitive offense. The court has reviewed the pre-sentence report as well as the state's written recommendation. The court has also reviewed the sentencing memos filed by Mr. Jackson and Mr. Garcia. The court has reviewed letters from the mitigation specialist, a letter from Jeanette Rodriguez Zavala, a letter from Barbara Fritz, a letter from Armando Hernandez Sr., one from Jasmine L. Hernandez, one from Jasmine V. Hernandez, a neuropsychological evaluation from Dr. Weller, the victim impact statement from the following people: Stan Ayler, A-Y-L-O-R, Tyrus Beckwith, first name is T-Y-R-U-S, last name is Beckwith, B-E-C-K-W-I-T-H, a letter from Peyton Kaspari, C-A-S-P-A-R-I, a letter from Albert Cobain, a letter from Alexis Melissa Glenn, a letter from Martha Hernandez Ramirez, a letter from Courtney Hunt, a letter from Ashley McDonald, a letter from David Machado, a letter from Maria Consuelo Magana, a letter from Megan Medina, a letter from Christopher O'Leary, one from Ali Perez, one from Mara Resendez, a letter from Caitlin Rogers, a letter from Robert Clark Shaw and Agnes Marie Shaw, a letter from Daniela Strauss, a letter from Jasmine Tossin, T-O-S-S-I-N-G, a letter from Martha Hernandez Ramirez, a letter from Omar Villarreal Ocasio Torres, a letter from Tyler Wells, one from Scott Lindstrom, one from Keisha Salazar Yanez, one from Bob Tremble, one from Brianna Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N, one from Rochelle Baldemero, a letter from Gail Baldemero, a letter from Samantha Baldemero, a letter from Gloria Montoya for Destiny Bain, a letter from Destiny Bain's mother, a letter from Amy Baird Riley, a letter from Cherie Farrar, and a letter from Nesrin, N-E-S-R-I-N, last name is S-I-N-I-S-C-A-L-C-H-I. And there's another letter from Nesrin Arnori. Would the state like to be heard regarding sentencing?
Yes, Your Honor, before I give the court some comments, there are several folks who'd like to address.
Certainly. Can you come to this podium here, please? Good morning, ma'am. Right here.
Good
Can I get
morning,
your
Your
name,
Honor.
please?
My name is Kathleen Bain. I'm Destiny Bain's mom. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. Your Honor, we went through so much for this guy. He doesn't even begin to think of all the issues that we went through with my little girl. The day she called me the minute she was shot, and I stayed with her on the phone. I drove all the way to Westgate. She was still on the phone with me. I could hear her screaming, calling, telling me to hurry to get there. I tried really hard to get there, but the place was blocked off. I couldn't get in. I couldn't walk. I did everything I could. But by the time I got there, they had already taken the kids to the hospital. I tried to get a hold of Alfredo's family. I finally got a hold of the dad. Alfredo had asked to take Destiny to go buy himself a new hat. They wanted to go to the mall, but that mall had a shooting just recent, and I told him it wasn't a good idea. I didn't let the kids go anywhere. I made them stay home all the time because of the pandemic. So I thought, since it was getting toward the end, I thought it was okay for them to go. So they told me they were going to go to Westgate, and I said okay, and I let them go. By the time I got to the hospital, I was so afraid because Destiny was telling me that she couldn't hear Alfredo no more. She said, "Mom, I think he's gone." She goes, "I can't hear him no more." She says, she laid there. Everybody was taking photos of my little girl, taking videos of her while she laid there. Nobody came to help her. She was crying and nobody was there to help her. After some time, finally, Kelly came up and she helped her. I was so thankful for them, her and her husband, for stepping up and helping. She helped Destiny through it all. She was there with her the entire time. By the time I got to the hospital, they had already put her into a coma. She was bleeding so bad that they had to stop it, and she was so upset they had to calm her down. So by the time I got there, she was already in a coma. Alfredo was on the other side. They had already put him down too. Everything that this man did, not only did he do it to her, he did it to the whole family. Everybody that loved Destiny and Alfredo were hurt that day. He didn't bother to think about all our expenses, our time and our travel. I stayed with Destiny throughout the whole thing. Every night I stayed with her at the hospital. Every night I heard the little girl crying, sweating, waking up, having nightmares, being chased. We put her through trauma therapy, physical therapy, all kinds of therapy. The doctor told us that she has post-traumatic stress disorder. Even listening to the 4th of July was hard. She stopped going out, and she stopped getting dressed up. All she ever wore were sweats. This little girl, she wanted to be a nurse. Now her legs all swelled up, even though this happened a couple years ago. Yesterday, her leg was all swollen again. The doc told her that he needs to go back in again. The plastic surgeon told us that they need to do at least 40 more procedures on her legs. But she's such a trooper, she just still hangs in there. But she stopped going to the doctors. She's tired of it all. She's tired of everything, going back and forth to every doctor and every hospital, trying to get herself fixed. Destiny had a hard life as she was growing up, but he made her life harder. He made Alfredo's life harder too. He has a hard time dealing with what's going on. And I feel so sorry for Alfredo. What he went through, he was working. And they shot him and he couldn't even work no more. He was so stressed out and under a lot of pressure. I saw him today and I don't know what else I could do for him. Your Honor, this man, he planned all this. He put it all on the computer for everybody to see. He bought a gun. He just didn't buy any gun, Your Honor. He bought an AK-15. He shot my baby, but he didn't just shoot her. He blew her leg out from under her. The bullet went in and blew out the whole front end of her leg. Was gone. I've been coming to court. They're telling me that there's something wrong with him. His parents say there's something wrong with him. That's no excuse. The family and the parents and the brother, and they all should know that if he was stupid, if he was crazy, they should have put a lock and key on that gun. They should never let him buy a gun or bring the gun into his home so this evil man can come and hurt my family. He hurt those kids. He not only hurt them that day, but the hurt will continue the rest of their life. My little girl only has one artery left, just one. And every day, we wonder about it because she just had a car accident and her legs were hurting. The doc says he wants to go back in again, but she won't. What if she loses her artery again? You have three arteries going through your leg. She only has one. And that's having a hard time now as it swells up again a couple of days ago. The horror doesn't end. It continues and it will continue for Destiny. And it's not fair to let this guy sit in jail using my tax dollars to take care of him while we all have to suffer with Destiny. What about her life? He ruined her chance to become a nurse because she can't stand on her legs anymore. It's wrong for him to come in here and say that he wants a lighter sentence. Your Honor, I expect the court and I expect justice here today. I want that guy in jail forever for what he did to that baby, for what he did to Destiny, for what he did to my family, for what he did to Alfredo and Alfredo's family. It was wrong. You just don't walk in and just buy a gun. He hunted my baby down. He followed her and he chased her. And he shot her. Then he turned around and he shot Alfredo. It's absolutely wrong to have this guy just walk out the door. He needs to suffer too. But how's he going to suffer? Because he's got a nice bed to lay in. He's going to get 3 meals a day brought to him. Well, my baby can't even get a job because her legs hurt. It's absolutely wrong. And I want to see justice here, Your Honor. I want to make sure that that man does not go out and run doing this again to somebody else, because if he did it once, he's going to do it again.
Hello, Gail Baldomero. I am the mother of the daughter that you're going to see in this video at the very end, who lays on the ground with a gun in her face, an AK-15. It's not okay. When we watch this video, we're going to see him talk about what he's going to do. His plan to take people out, his plan to destroy people. He cheers the world with his beer can. He goes and he hurts 2 young individuals who their life has changed forever. And then he walks across this shopping center, shooting his gun. My daughter runs. She's for her life. She's fearing for her life. She gets shot in the leg. And then she tries to hide from him, and he finds her, and he hunts her down. And he points a gun at her face, and he's filming this for the world to see. This is live. This is intentional. From my understanding, is the gun jammed? That's probably why I have my daughter today. Otherwise, we probably would have had a fatality. Today, 2 years later, my daughter hears a gunshot. She jumps. Sometimes she goes to the floor. She calls me when we hear about other shootings. Mom, are you okay? Our family is never the same, will never be the same. We hear of all these other shootings. We call each other. We're making sure everybody's okay. Sam's trying to take care of us because she knows that we're in a fragile state. Sam also has been diagnosed with PTSD. It has caused her to lose work. It's caused her to leave school. She has a very difficult time facing reality. It's not okay what happened. It's just not okay. I'm going to ask that you go the furthest sentence that's possible. And I say that because if we've already heard, his life goes on. He gets his 3 meals a day. He gets a bed. The other 3 victims that actually, there's more than 3 victims. There was hundreds of people there that are victims. But the 3 that I know of that were here today, they also have to live with this for life. It doesn't end for them. They have to try to get a normalcy back. It's not that easy. It's the end of the day. Just imagine if it was you laying on the ground with a gun in your face. It messes you up for life, is what it does. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Kelly Hammett. I am the nurse that was at Westgate at the time of the shooting. My husband and myself my husband passed Armando as he was shooting, ran in and to take care of Destiny, took his belt off, put it on as a tourniquet. I came down, went past him as well, and went to provide care to Alfredo as he was laying on the ground, and used my hands to cover the wounds to try to save him until police could bring first aid kit to provide chest seal dressings onto the wounds. Went over and provided care to Destiny, helping with the large wound that she had on her lower leg. And I would say in all of the years as a nurse that I provided care to patients, I never thought that I would find myself in a setting, in a place that I would consider a safe place, my home, because I lived at Westgate at the time, to be a place where I would no longer find myself safe and secure, finding myself providing that kind of care to children who had been shot, and just thinking of the additional victims that might be out there that weren't able to get access to care because of the setting that we were in, and that they were still actively looking for him. And I would say that event certainly changed my life, my husband's life. We no longer felt safe there. Although I provided care to many people and have witnessed a lot of horrific things that people do to each other, I never thought that I would see something like that firsthand and be in the middle of it. It was horrific. It was sad. It was very sad. And I know the impact that it's made on myself and my husband. We've since had to relocate to another state just to feel a sense of well-being and safety in our personal lives. We certainly still maintain contact with Destiny and her family, and have talked about many things that we know that she has experienced through this time, and would just ask that, the court consider all of those things as you think about the judgment today. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
wants to address the court this time. There may be some people on Teams that may want to make a statement.
Is there anyone who's called in or wishes to make a statement to the court this morning? I don't believe so.
Judge, I've put together a little PowerPoint that includes some of the social media postings by the defendant that day. I am cognizant of the searing pain that many of the folks who've spoken today and the folks who've written you letters feel, and many of them, or several of them, have told me they want the court to see these. They want to, as Samantha's mom said, they want you to see, actually to hear the defendant's voice that day. I have spoken with the victims, our advocate has spoken with the victims, and the folks who were present in the courtroom have indicated they want us to show this to the court.
Hello, my name's Armando Hernandez, and I'm going to be the shooter of Westgate 2020. Absolutely right.
As I said in the state's sentencing recommendation, as the court's aware, this was not the defendant just walking up and deciding to take action, deciding to direct violence at individuals at Westgate. He wanted the world to know.
Hello, my name's Armando Hernandez, and I'm going to be the shooter of Westgate 2020. So this is to get back to means this. Also, I am shooting at Westgate. Let's get this done, guys. Let's. This is society's bull fucking shit. Yes, this is. This is all society's bullshit.
I shared with that with the court because that was the defendant's own feed. That was what he was filming. That's what he wanted the world to see that day. There was someone on top of the parking garage who was filmed, and you can also hear what was going on at this time.
Running. This man is shooting so much down here. Let's see what's happening.
This is a photo, Judge, from, as you see the window shot out. This is one of the restaurants in the Westgate area that day. Samantha's mom talked to the court, but I think it's important the court understand who Samantha was before this day. Gives you an idea, she was an artist. She enjoyed living life. She worked at Westgate. That was a safe place for her. Her mom addressed the court, but I think it's important the court see and read what she felt in looking at the defendant as he had his AR-15 trained on her.
The society's full.
Just a couple of things, Judge, and this is going to be a recurring theme as I talk a little bit about what not just the gunshot victims, but many of the folks who were just there that day, had a gun pointed at them, had to run for their lives. And you'll see again and again, they don't feel safe. How it impacts relationships. How they've changed their personality. Nightmares, flashbacks. Folks who were outgoing become introverted. You'll see that again and again and again. Alfredo came in this morning, Judge. He didn't want to address the court, as is his right. But the information before the court is that Alfredo almost died that day, but for some good Samaritans who happened to be able to be there to provide some care. He should have died. He was in ICU for an extended period of time. I went out to Glendale that night. Most of those officers, emergency personnel, believed that he was going to die based on the nature of his wounds. This is actually a statement from the Randy, the husband of the nurse, who encountered Alfredo as he lay in a pool of blood, not moving. Incredibly fortunate to still be with us today. Destiny's mom obviously expressed much of the pain that she has felt. Numerous surgeries. You saw those horrific pictures, and you heard the impact, Your Honor. But as a couple of the folks who've already spoken told the court, this is not limited to the three folks who were shot. This is not limited to the folks who had guns pointed on them. There were hundreds of people who ran for their lives. And those people had families. And it has, as you'll see in some of the comments, it has butterflied to hundreds and hundreds of people how this event caused by the defendant had such a profound effect. Individual by the name of Juan Baldonado remembers the offense. He wanted to do more. You'll hear that. A number of people were there. People who carried guns but didn't have a gun that day. The feeling of guilt for not stopping Armando Hernandez. Folks who now, a number of folks, now they carry guns. It's the only way they can feel safe. They didn't carry them before. Latoya Celestine was there with 5 of her friends, continues to live in fear. Nerves never gone back to normal. Many of these people say again and again, I can't go back to Westgate. I can't even be there anymore. Social anxiety, scared to go in public. Zach Bloom, one of the other folks who was there that day, suffers from PTSD. Drew Francis also suffers from PTSD, easily triggered anytime he hears a gunshot or something that sounds like a gunshot. You heard from Aaron Hammett. They indicated in statements that they all too feel that they have PTSD as a result of this. And these are folks, this is a nurse, this is somebody who had been in military. It impacts everything. The defendant's actions impacted everybody who was there that day in a dramatic way. Stephanie Rocha wants the court to know that these were traumatic events. Can't even talk about it, still cries when she thinks about it. Elizabeth Vasquez was one of the named victims, one of the aggravated assault victims. Feels anxious, stressed, fears that something like this is going to happen again. Caitlin Rogers, most terrifying night of her life. One of the takeaways from what she told our advocates was that the defendant has taken away her freedom and left her with a life full of mental health issues that she will always struggle with. And again, these are not things that go away. These are things that will affect each of the individuals for the rest of their life. Jasmine tossing, super anxious. Again, here's another individual who felt the need and was compelled to buy a gun just to have a sense of protection, kept reliving the events. Ashley McDonald, heightened anxiety, constantly watching surroundings. A number of these people, if they feel comfortable even going out, where's the exit? How can I protect myself if this happens again? Donnella Strauss had to shelter in place that day. Remember seeing the defendant right that day, and importantly, was there with children and cannot and has not gone back with her children to Westgate. David Machado owned one of the restaurants there that day. Obviously, it impacted him emotionally. In the case of David, it impacted him financially. This was one of the places where victims were brought, where people sheltered in place. He lost a lot of employees. A number of these folks worked at Westgate that day. After that day, they said, I don't even want to be here. I can't be here. So this impacted David emotionally and significantly financially. Megan Medina, this was one of the most traumatic events of her life. Quit her job. She was one of those working at Westgate that day. Couldn't handle the fear, couldn't handle the stress of being at the place where she had this experience. Remembers a man grabbing his child and running for their lives. Mauro Resendez, another individual has PTSD, another individual who can't go back to Westgate. This one is, I think, important for the court to consider. She called her two kids that day from Westgate. She thought she was going to die. And to this day, she says that her kids feel anxious. Her kids, who weren't even there, are in counseling. Because that shows the impact beyond those people who are physically there, but their families and their loved ones. Omar Villarreal, Rocio Torres, this affected them again. Anxiety, depression, paranoia, living in fear day to day. Maria Hernandez Ramirez, another individual who worked at Westgate, suffers from anxiety, vivid nightmares, can't go out in crowds. What she says is, he changed me socially and psychologically. This changed my life. Alexis Glenn, when I picked up my family, they were all crying, waiting for me. He put me through hell. Again, they don't go to Westgate anymore. Quit her job. Albert Cobain. Saw the shooter shot Alfredo. He had previously witnessed a shooting. He sought counseling. He took time off of work. Peyton Kaspari can't go to Yard House. Not only can she not go to the Yard House at Westgate, she can't go to Yard Houses. Yard House restaurants are triggers for her. And this is someone who's in the military, but has PTSD as a result of this, and is struggled with being able to qualify using a handgun because of this experience. Katia Salazar Yanez was a school teacher there that day, had practiced these active shooter drills, unfortunately, as teachers have to do in our world. Never thought she was going to have to experience that for herself in a place like Westgate. Changed her life, changed how she lives her life, does not feel comfortable in those open spaces, public places. Ali Perez didn't sleep for 2 days, hasn't been able to return to Westgate. Scott Wenstrand experienced fear that he has never felt before, felt helpless, again, changed his life, always looking for escape routes in a restaurant, wherever he is. That's what many of these folks say again and again and again. When I go somewhere, I'm always thinking, is there going to be another mass shooter there? And are planning for it. Christopher O'Leary, this impacted him, painful, image seared in his mind of people running for their lives, hid under a table but didn't know what happened that day. Robert Clark Shaw, Agnes Marie Shaw, went to counseling, still can't sit with their back to the door, nightmares. Anytime they hear a bang, they instantly duck. Tyrus Beckwith saw the defendant shooting into a candy store. Now, that's not where Destiny and Alfredo were. I say that because we are incredibly fortunate, as horrific as the experience of Destiny, Alfredo, and Samantha are, incredibly fortunate that there weren't many more casualties shooting into a candy store that day. Another individual wished he had his gun. Wanted to go back to Westgate, didn't have his glasses, but started shaking uncontrollably. As a result of this, he and his girlfriend broke up. Tyler Wells thinks about this all the time. Traumatic, had children with him, purchased a gun. Again, people seeking solace in their own protection because of their experience that day. Courtney Hunt, traumatized, again, will not go back to Westgate because of the fear and the memory of that day. Maria Consuelo Magana was there for her birthday. The fear that she feels and felt that day will fill her with terror for the rest of her life. Nightmares, insomnia, affects every aspect of her life. And that's just a sampling, Judge, of the people who actually did speak to law enforcement or spoke to some of the advocates. Many people got out of there as soon as they could. So there are innumerable folks out there who we may never hear from, but we can infer many of the same experiences. There's a couple of clips I want to play for Your Honor that I don't believe you have seen from the defendant's interview that night, and specifically what he was there to do and why.
Which is a horrible treatment towards me. Absolutely.
You said you should be respected with a gun?
Yes, I feel like I will be held with respect.
Yes. So when you went to Westgate, you were looking for people that were around your age?
I was seeing this, and I started opening fire. I started opening fire.
What were you aiming for when you opened fire?
People my age.
Okay.
I had no thoughts people over at least 10 years.
Okay. Did you hit people?
I believe I did.
Okay.
I believe I hit that girl. I didn't want it. I believe I hit that older woman too, but I did not want her in her life.
He was looking for young people, and he just started shooting. Not, I just wanted to shoot them in the feet or the legs. I was looking for young people. I was targeting young people to take my anger, frustration, and to demand respect.
caught me angry. Yes, sir.
But the lights, do you remember the lights going out?
I don't really remember lights going out.
Okay.
Because when I see some lights.
So we've talked about that lady by the red car.
Yes, sir.
That you said you want to play with AJ or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember the other people that you shot? Where they were?
Yes, I took it from my time rockets.
Okay.
Yes.
What were they
I
doing?
believe that they were just like, I believe they were walking or trying to run.
Okay.
I was engaging.
Okay. Describe that for me.
I remember a female, and she was calling her boyfriend, no, and he was scared as hell, but I was just coming up there. But I looked intimidated.
You looked intimidated or looked intimidating?
I'm sorry, intimidated.
Okay.
I was just coming up there and I started firing.
Okay. And they started running?
They started running, yes.
And then
I
you
left
shot
her
them?
alone. Then I left her alone. Let's go find some other people. Started shooting around.
Do you remember hitting her?
Yes.
Do you remember hitting him?
I don't remember hitting him, though.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said earlier you think you shot 3 people.
Yes, I believe I shot people.
So who were the 3 people that you believe you shot?
Boyfriend, that female, and plus that woman in the way.
But you don't remember hitting him, but you believe you shot him?
I believe I shot, yes. But I remember exactly hitting the female, though.
Okay.
That's all.
Do you know where you may have hit him?
Hit him? I believe the leg.
Okay. And where do you think you shot her?
Shot her on the lower back.
Okay. Did you shot some?
Again, I play this for your honor to push off this idea that he wasn't trying to kill that day. He thought he shot Destiny in the lower back. We know that he shot Alfredo in the chest.
Yes, sir.
In his interview with the police, the defendant, the detective says, point blank, why'd you do this? What drove you? What was sort of the final straw? And the answer is both chilling and horrifying at how many lives were impacted by a closed movie theater.
Things could change. Their statuses, I don't know. It's active. This is still actively happening. This is a big deal. You understand that?
I understand, sir.
We talked about it before.
Absolutely.
You wanted it to be a big deal.
Yes, sir. But the month that actually came out, I kind of knew what. But we didn't expect it to happen. It's not good.
It just did.
It did. Absolutely not.
What made you go like that, if you had to think back today?
Just movies, I said. Seen all the girls.
Okay. The movies and the couples.
Yes, I've been seeing that for years. Holding back.
Why couples? Like, what is that?
I feel like they make fun of me.
Okay.
They make fun of people like me. Other themselves.
Okay.
Like they like to humiliate us. And see why.
Tell me how they make fun of you.
Well, because like you see it all around. You think of Tinder, they guys like me never get a match. We do, but like it's very, you gotta pay. And it's very, I seem like I have a good-looking friend named Roman.
Earlier in the interview, Judge, the defendant had described how he'd gone to Westgate. He had his AR-15. He had this idea of what he was going to do, something that he says that he had thought about for years. He'd been thinking about doing something like this. Maybe he's torn a little bit. Maybe he's not sure. Goes to the movies. Movies closed because that was the beginning of the pandemic. Goes back, drinks the beers, and then decides those people that he believes wronged him on Tinder, on social media, now is his opportunity to exact revenge on them. And throughout this interview, it's this targeting of young couples who had what he wanted. As I described in my sentencing memo, the defendant says himself he was an incel, which I've described as someone who is involuntarily celibate, who has profound anger because of their inability to be in some sort of in a romantic relationship. And that manifested in this impact to hundreds that day. As I said, Judge, this could have, but for whether you want to call it God or chance or fate, this could have and very easily been a Uvalde. It could have been a Parkland, a Highland Park, what we see on the news so often now. Westgate could have been in that same conversation. He brought 3 magazines. The third magazine with 20 rounds, it jammed that day. As Samantha's mom said, that might be why Samantha is still alive today. And as you're going to hear in this is the final clip that I have for you, Judge, what his intentions were with that last clip.
Things could change.
They fired all the rounds in it. But I remember the gun was malfunctioning at some point.
How was it malfunctioning?
It was malfunctioning. It didn't fire. Even though I was like, you know, on the side they are, we touched them. It wouldn't fire. Even though I was taking it back in, it wouldn't fire.
But you wanted to fire more. It just wasn't.
Yes, I wanted to fire more. I grabbed people down there.
But you weren't able to in that crowd.
Yes, and that's it.
Did you have in your head a goal of how many people you wanted to hit?
I wanted like at least 10.
Okay.
Like if I at least get 10 people to hit, I think I'll be good. Gain some respect. That's what I said.
Okay. What did you, when you posted to Snapchat, and I've seen bits and pieces of it, again, being honest with you.
At least 10, Judge. In that interview, the defendant talks about having a dark side. And that dark side emerged and had individual impact. But it had a collective impact to Westgate and the patrons of Westgate and folks who frequent Westgate. Now, defense counsel is going to come stand up, represent their client. They're going to talk about mental health. I've talked a little bit about mental health in my recommendation. I care a great deal about mental health, Judge. In the type of cases that I prosecute, I see individuals suffering from mental health crises frequently. I always take serious consideration when I'm presented with information about individuals' mental health. Which critical, and I don't dispute, as I said in my memo, that the various disorders the defendant has and has been diagnosed with. I don't dispute that he has those things. But the state's position, as exhibited by Dr. Katie Kuhlman, who is a trained psychologist, is there simply isn't correlation between those mental health issues and what the defendant did that day. Because somebody is potentially on the autism spectrum, or has a lower IQ, or any of the disorders, that doesn't mean they're going to or should commit this horrific event like we saw at Westgate. The defendant had demands that day, demands for respect, demands to take out his anger on those young couples, those people that did nothing wrong but being young. That was it. That was their sin for the defendant. You heard from the victims. You saw the letters. They too have a demand, and it's the demand for justice. And that demand carries with it an assurance that the community is protected from the defendant for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson?
Maybe we approach briefly on
The record on the record. We're back on the record in CR 2020-120-293-001, State of Arizona versus Armando Hernandez. The record will reflect the presence of all parties. The defendant is also present. Mr. Jackson, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Just to kind of brief the court, I will give kind of an opening remark, and then Mr. Garcia will speak on behalf of the family. And then I'll kind of tie it up with some of the mitigation. I won't rehash a lot of stuff. Obviously, we gave you a lot of reading material for that. And, as court and counsel are well aware, I fully understand firsthand the tragedy that the victims and family face based on Armando's actions. It is evident that we have a crisis in this country that continue to plague our communities. Obviously, as we embark on sentencing, it is important that Armando be sentenced for his actions, not for what other people have done and what goes on. His actions were horrific, and Armando acknowledges that, and we ask that you sentence his accordingly within the plea and law. Obviously, we have prepared a sentencing memo with mitigating factors for the court to consider. Dr. Weller's report, a report by a mitigation specialist, Mr. Hahn. The court has read that, letters from the family. Before I go into a lot of those mitigating factors, I know Mr. Garcia would like to address the court on behalf of Armando's family.
Good morning, Your Honor. On behalf of Mr. Hernandez's family and Mr. Hernandez, we asked for the court to exercise some leniency if possible. We understand that this is truly a horrific situation that has impacted on people's lives. The issue then is what is necessary as far as a sentence in order for justice to be met. We are of the position that if the court follows the state's recommendations of 15 years for counts 1 and 2, and then 10 years for count 5, the issue would then be whether he received a 25-year sentence or a 40-year sentence for if counts 1 and 2 were run concurrently, which the court is able to do. This was one fact pattern, as horrific as it was. A 25-year sentence is equivalent to the sentence that is given to somebody who has committed second-degree murder, the maximum sentence that that person can receive. A 25-year sentence is a sentence that people who are charged with first-degree murder and plead down and have a second-degree murder resolution by plea would be looking at. 25 years is a significant amount of time. Mr. Hernandez's family will remind you that he is 23 years old, that he has the possibility of returning into society and being a contributing member, that he is presently addressing his mental health issues and will continue to get mental health care while in the custody of the Arizona Department of Corrections. That when he comes out, he can contribute to the community as best he can under the supervision of a doctor. He will have a 7-year probation tail, which will allow the state to monitor him as far as mental health care if necessary. So we'd ask for the leniency and mercy of this court to run sentences 1 and 2 concurrently. Now, there is nothing that I can do or say that can alleviate the pain and anguish suffered by the victims. There is nothing that I can say on behalf of the family that can alleviate the concern that the family should have done something to prevent this in the past. All that we can say is that we ask this court for mercy, we ask this court for justice, and in this particular case, we believe justice is 25 years in prison. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Your Honor knows, as he has read the sentencing memo, also took part in the settlement conference. We're here that the defendant obviously has taken responsibility. That is a mitigating factor. I do believe the defendant has genuine remorse. Even as soon as his interview, he talked about how the demon and the monster had taken over. He has, on several occasions, apologized to the victims, to us. In his pre-sentence interview, he also did the same thing. I don't know if Your Honor read that. Due to his mental conditions, Armando does not feel that he can speak in front of everyone that's here and didn't want to, and felt like he couldn't do it. So he asked me to do it for him. So I will reiterate what he's said to me in the past and what he has said to the pre-sentence reporter. That interview took place approximately, I think, back probably at the end of April. And obviously, that is something that he doesn't have to speak with the pre-sentence report writer. That is something that we talked about, him not saying anything. And he, in that setting, it was just myself, the pre-sentence report writer, and him, and he did feel comfortable saying how he felt. And he acknowledged specifically, and I think this is of note, and I think does go to genuine remorse, that the harm and trauma he caused the victims. He acknowledged that, and in that interview, he specifically says that he apologized and hoped that someday maybe they would forgive him, and that he understands why they would not, and respectfully understands that they never do, in spite of his apology. So I think that is pretty telling of, where he is now in his journey of medication and different things that he's taking. And as he said, he has a lot of guilt and remorse since committing these crimes, and he fully doesn't understand what made him get to that point. He's working with people. I think it's of note when looking at the state's expert, where they never met Armando, they never spoke with him. They read a few CHS records from years ago. They don't know that approximately over the last 10 months he's been on a different regimen of medication. I've noticed a huge difference in Armando from the first day that I met him until now, and I do see that there is genuine remorse about what happened. He does obviously have family support. They have been here to the court hearings. You heard Mr. Garcia speak on their behalf. Obviously the family does not support what Armando did, but they do support him and hope he gets the help that he needs. Obviously, everybody wishes, Monday Day Quarterback, that something different could happen, but, the family had no idea that anything like this could happen. Obviously, another mitigating factor is criminal history. Armando has no criminal history prior to this incident. He's never been arrested. His age, cognitive disorder, mental health issue kind of all plays in fact together, and I think that is probably some of the most compelling mitigation. Obviously, his age at the time was 20 years old, but due to his cognitive disorders, his mental health, looking at Dr. Weller's report, you can see that his age is far lower than that. Reading level of someone between 2.6 and 3.2 grade level, which would put him at 8 or 9 years old. He's a long history of disorders that are referenced in Dr. Weller's report. Untreated ADHD, has learning disabilities, conduct disorder, depression, PTSD from long-term effects of bullying. He's been bullied most of his life because of his conditions, because of the things that he had. Experts and doctors talk about how bullying experiences are associated with emotional difficulties, loneliness, anxiety, depression, adjustment differences, low academic performances, low self-esteem, lack of appropriate social skills, as well as psychological disassociations, avoidance, and PTSD. These are all things that Dr. Weller talked about in her report. Additionally, he was recently diagnosed with a myriad of mental health disorders, many of which can profoundly affect one's behavior, especially when faced with a major disappointment and with the anxieties and stuff that's going on. One of these diagnoses is autism spectrum disorder. And Dr. Weller talks a little bit about how some of these undiagnosed or untreated mental health disorders can explain many of Armando's longstanding behaviors and had people got at an earlier age that maybe someone could have done. His mental health has been untreated since coming into the jail. He is now med compliant and has been for over a year. Also, I think of note is his unspecified schizophrenia spectrum. That is another thing that Dr. Weller talked about. Studies show that young brains, even prior to the age of 30, are not fully developed. Armando's brain, with autism spectrum disorder, with impairment, intellectual impairment and language impairment, his intellectual disabilities, his PTSD, his generalized anxiety, panic disorder, unspecified schizophrenia spectrum, psychotic disorder, and his history of child psychological abuse. You know, these things all coupled it's been shown in some studies that videos of violence and violent video games produce dopamine in the brain. The rush that comes from dopamine release can be similar to that of cocaine or other drugs. And especially on a brain that is not fully developed, like Armando's, there's consequences for him completely to do that. Obviously, not everyone who watches violent videos commit horrific crimes. But nonetheless, studies show that it can happen and that these things are intermittent factors. And given, I think, Armando's autism disorder, schizophrenia, his other mental health, his abuse went through his insecurity, these things played a factor in it and should be considered as mitigation in this. And again, we talked a little bit about Catherine Coleman. Despite what the state's expert says, she doesn't disagree with anything that Dr. Weller says, and the fact that these are any of the diagnoses, anything like that. So it is important to note that. I respectfully, and on behalf of Mr. Hernandez, request the court to sentence Armando on count 1 to 14 years, and then on count 2, a slightly higher sentence of 17 years, and have those run concurrent. That would take into fact the consideration of multiple counts. And then I would ask on count 3 that he be sentenced to 8 years and not run consecutive, and that on count 4 he be given 7 years supervised probation with mental health terms. I do also agree that 25 years is appropriate. I think if you look at other cases in the community, it is very difficult to kind of figure out where a sentence lies in this. This is a very unique situation. But I think it's of note, and the state cut off some of the interview after that, where it's clear in those interviews that there's something going on mentally with Mr. Hernandez. And I think that is a huge mitigating factor, and it should be considered. Punishment for a crime is obviously part of what the judge needs to look at. But other part is what kind of help and different things. He has done and tried to do things to try to address what has happened. He clearly acknowledges that what he did was wrong. And does, like I said, based on his statements and his interactions with me, I do believe he has genuine remorse. Obviously, the impact of the victims in this case is an extreme aggravation. But I think we're talking here is these are aggravated sentences to begin with. 14 is an aggravated sentence because the range is 7 to 21. The presumptive is 10.5. 17 is even more aggravated. 8 is also an aggravated sentence when you're talking about a class 3. And I think given his mitigation, his mental health disorders, I do believe 25 is appropriate. And we do ask the court to sentence Mr. Hernandez to 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, a housekeeping matter. I'm showing credit for 779 days. Does that sound right?
I have it written at the very beginning. I'm sorry. I at $779 also. And one other issue, I guess, might be coming an issue, but as it relates to restitution, Mr. Hernandez would waive his presence for any restitution hearing. What I will do is if and when I get documents from Mr. Leiter, I will contact Mr. Hernandez at Department of Corrections, talk about those, and see what he wants to do. My guess is, based on my conversation with him, most likely be a stipulation, but that's usually how I do it, is I talk to them first, and my guess is this could be ongoing and be for a while.
And in that regard, Judge, there are restitution documents that were contained within the pre-sentence report. I don't know if Mr. Jackson saw those. Okay. So, okay. He's indicating that they haven't had an opportunity to review those with Mr. Hernandez, such that there's not going to be a stipulation. Today, I will continue to speak with Mr. Jackson regarding the outstanding restitution. And as in fact, I just got another document that was not prior to the pre-sentence report from Samantha regarding some of the monies that she spent. So I'll put that all together in a package and present that to Mr. Jackson and see if we can reach a stipulation. The only other thing I wanted to say, given that these are aggravated sentences, Judge, I would just ask that the court put on the record the aggravating factors so the record is clear. Thank you.
Courts consider the mitigating factors of the defendant's age, his mental health diagnosis and treatment, his acceptance of responsibility and apparent remorse for his actions, his family support as demonstrated by the people who have appeared in court today, and his lack of criminal history. As aggravating factors, the court has considered the physical and emotional harm to the victims and their families, the defendant's continued threat to society, the premeditation that occurred prior to him committing these acts, the use of a deadly weapon, and the fact that there are multiple victims. The court finds that the physical and emotional harm to the victims and the defendant's continued threat to society outweigh any mitigating factors that are present in this case. Therefore, the aggravated sentence is warranted. Earlier this morning, I heard several people tell me that what the defendant did was not okay. And what we have here is an individual who has had mental health issues and continues to have mental health issues, who went out and obtained a semi-automatic weapon, took that weapon to a populated public location and committed a senseless act of violence on innocent victims trying to gain some type of respect. These actions are reprehensible, horrific, and senseless. It's not okay. As to count one, it's ordered sentencing the defendant to the Arizona Department of Corrections for the maximum term of 17 years beginning today's date, with credit for 779 days time served. As to count two, it's ordered sentencing the defendant to the maximum term of 17 years in the Department of Corrections beginning today's date with 0 days time served. Sentencing the defendant to 17 years in the Department of Corrections with no time served. As to count five, it's ordered sentencing the defendant to the maximum term, less than maximum term of 10 years with 0 time served. Community supervision is imposed as to counts 1, 2, and 5. As to counts 1, 2, and 5. And the court's going to retain jurisdiction over restitution for a period of 15 years in those 3 counts and indicate that if a hearing is set, that the defendant waives his presence at that hearing. It's further ordered that counts 1, 2, and 5, the terms in the Department of Corrections be served consecutively with one another. As to count 6, it's ordered suspending the imposition of sentence and placing the defendant on supervised probation for a period of 7 years upon his absolute discharge from the Department of Corrections. The standard terms and conditions of probation apply. The financial assessments associated with this case are as follows. There's a monthly probation fee of $65, a time payment fee of $20, a probation assessment of $20, a criminal penalty assessment of $13, a victim rights enforcement assessment of $2, and a victim rights compensation fund assessment of $9. The beginning dates for those fines, fees, and assessments will be determined at a later date. As to all counts, it's ordered that the defendant will have no contact with the victims whatsoever and shall not return to the scene of the crime and shall pay restitution for all economic loss to all victims. It's further ordered that the defendant will forfeit any interest in any weapons, ammunition, and weapon accessories and currency seized in connection with this case. In this case, it's ordered dismissing counts 3, 4, and counts 7 through 39, and it's ordered that the defendant must submit to DNA testing for law enforcement identification purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, I impose the maximum sentences allowed under the plea, which equates to 44 years in the Department of Corrections, followed by 7 years of supervised probation. Mr. Hernandez, I don't think you can comprehend the amount of damage you've done to the victims in this case, their families, and the ripple effect your actions have had just because you're trying to gain respect. Unfortunately, we see acts like this happening more and more. We see people with mental health issues obtaining weapons and trying to convey some type of message to innocent victims in society. That's not okay. And is anything from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything from the House?
No, Your Honor.
Sir, you have the right to petition this court for post-conviction relief and to have a lawyer represent you. If you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you. If you can't afford the copies of the necessary records and transcripts, they'll be provided to you at no cost. If you want to file that petition for post-conviction relief, you have to file notice within 90 days of today's date, or you lose that right. Also, after completing this sentence, you have the right to ask the court to set aside the judgment of conviction in this matter, except as provided by statute. You also have the right to ask the court to restore the rights that have been impacted by the sentence imposed in this case. I'll need you to step over to my bailiff, sign for a copy of your post-conviction relief rights, your terms and conditions of probation, and provide the court a fingerprint. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I know this is very emotional on all sides. I hope that at some point everyone can move on and gain some type of closure, get counseling if you need it, on both sides. There are no winners here. Thank you.